Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Third Sector and Stanford for our webinar on our Social Innovation Fund Administrative Data Pilot Awards. We'll get started in just a minute. See if we have any other folks attending. All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Third Sector and Stanford's introductory webinar on our Social Innovation Fund Administrative Data Pilot Award. As a quick reminder to folks, this introductory webinar is being recorded, and so if anyone has any issues with that, feel free to step out at this time, but the recording will be circulated both via email and available to folks after we present. So with that, I will dive in. My name is Caroline Whistler. I am the co-founder and president of Third Sector Capital Partners, and it is my pleasure to be your guide, your virtual guide on this 1 hour long webinar, which we hope will be both informative for you and efficient, because if we end early, we are happy to end this webinar early. We are also really excited to gather your questions about the Administrative Data Pilot Award. We're going to go through several slides about what this opportunity looks like, what the eligibility criteria is, and who should apply for this opportunity. We'll discuss a bit about our application selection factors and project timelines, and then really want to leave as much time as possible for you to ask any questions you may have before the application launches on January 9th. You'll also get a chance to hear from not just me, but several of our other partners from Stanford and from the state of California in this partnership for this grant. And we look forward to the next hour with you all. So as I mentioned before, my name is Caroline Whistler. I'm co-founder and president of Third Sector. And we are one of the nonprofit leaders in developing outcomes-oriented contracts with state and local government. We have been awarded, this is our third Social Innovation Fund award. So we have been working with the federal government on promoting pay-for-success projects, but also broader outcomes-oriented projects across the country. Been working in almost 20 communities nationwide and launched outcomes-oriented contracts in 3 states at this point, in Massachusetts, Ohio, and in California. And we are so excited to be here today to share a new partnership with Stanford University that we hope will be able to provide some value-added services for your communities. So with that, I would love for Charles Varner to say a few words about his role and Stanford's role in this partnership.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, this is Charles Varner. I'm Executive Director of the Center on Poverty and Inequality at Stanford University, and we're very pleased to be working with Third Sector and with the Social Innovation Fund on this new administrative data project. Just to give you a little bit of background about what we do at the center, we aim to improve the country's infrastructure for evaluating and developing evidence-based policy on poverty and inequality. The expansion of this administrative data infrastructure for research is a central focus for both our center and for Stanford University more broadly. In particular, the university at the Institute for Research in the Social Sciences houses a branch of the Federal Statistical Research Data Center run by the Census Bureau. And as well, many of the country's top administrative data researchers are Center on Poverty and Inequality faculty leaders. In particular, on this project, David Grusky, who is director of the Center on Poverty and Inequality, Raj Chetty, who is director of the Stanford Opportunity Lab, and Mark Duggan, director of the Stanford Institute on Economic and Policy Research, will be leading this project to access administrative data for use by Pay for Success programs. I want to highlight a couple of the data infrastructure initiatives at the center that will be relevant for this administrative data project. In particular, we have launched the American Opportunity Study, which is a national initiative that entails linking individual records across the 1960 through 2010 decennial censuses with the 2008 through 2015 American Community Surveys, and appending further information to these records from other administrative sources available in the Census Bureau Research Data Center framework. At the state level, we have also launched the California Longitudinal Administrative Database. And this is a data set that links decennial census data, American Community Survey data, and California tax return data. And as we'll hear more from Mike and Will today, hopefully very soon, California program data as well. This will allow us to improve California's capacity to monitor trends in poverty and labor market outcomes. We're also launching similar initiatives in Oregon and Washington State. So those are a couple of the initiatives that will be relevant for this project. And finally, I just want to introduce Jonathan Fisher, who is joining us on this project. Jonathan is an economist and a former administrator of the New York Census Research Data Center. So we're very pleased to have him joining us at Stanford to lead up this project. Just want to say how happy we are to have him. He's going to be taking the lead along with me in curating the data that we need for this project and in negotiating the data access agreements with the various entities that you, the service providers, may wish to access. So very pleased to be joining with Caroline, and I'll turn it back over to Caroline at this time.
Thank you so much, Charles. And before we've even gotten into the details, I just really appreciate the partnership with Stanford. I think you can see that we're combining both a deep experience in data analysis and data access that we hope to share with the grantees as part of this award, with what third sector does, which is help communities to deploy and learn from the data, turn that data into information that can help you improve lives in your communities. So we are excited to be teaming up, but we know that while data is extremely important, it's all about measurably improving lives in the communities where you serve certain individuals. And for that, we need partners also beyond Stanford and third sector. So we, for this competition, are looking at partnerships in California, Oregon, and Washington as well, to make sure that the local governments have access to the data that they need in order to be successful. And we're joined today by a couple of those partners from California on the call. And so I'd love to turn it over to Will Lightbourne and Mike Wilkening just to introduce yourselves a little bit and talk about why you all are partnering with us on this project.
Sure, thanks, Caroline. This is Will Lightbourne at the Department of Social Services. Good morning, colleagues. We've been working with the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality for the past year, basically, to consider ways that the data that they have access to from census, tax information, et cetera, can be sort of integrated or matched with state social policy data from our administrative program information systems to really get a feel for how we can best deploy resources to sort of minimize inequality and in fact increase economic advancement for the people we're serving. The active step, of course, that's now sort of helping move this forward is the involvement of third sector via the Social Investment Fund process, which will give the opportunity for potentially a sort of a specific group of local governments to participate in an active fashion with both the support of Stanford and third sector, not simply to accumulate data, but to really develop a sort of a comfort level in using that data in program management. So we're very excited to be part of this. And Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Wilkenane. Great, thank you, Will. This is Mike Wilkenane. I'm Undersecretary of Health and Human Services for California. And just to build a bit on what Will was talking about and the partnerships. So we also been working the last couple of years to really better understand what data resources we have available, both within the state and then with our partners externally, to really look at how we're running our programs throughout the agency and trying to find those partnerships that will allow us to really build on the strengths that we have and the strengths we have in our partners to better deliver services to Californians. And so this project, when we heard about it and when we started talking about it with Caroline, is just right up that alley of really bringing together people that understand how to analyze data and also have access to some data that otherwise we don't have access to, and really use that to look at some ways that we can really improve the efficiency of the programs and better deliver services. So we're really excited to be part of this effort.
Thank you both. And I think we also have Kathy Senderling McDonald with us from the County Welfare Directors Association of California.
Oops, they mute. Hi, this is Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi to everyone on the webinar, and thank you so much for the invitation to participate and say a few words. CWDA represents the county human services agencies from all 58 counties in California. We are a county-administered, state-overseen system here in our state. And CWDA and our board has tried to be long a leader on poverty and inequality issues. So we see this project as a real opportunity for counties and localities. We know that counties are already participating locally in developing data and will be interested in doing more to demonstrate the effectiveness of our programs, manage our programs, identify gaps, and advocate at the local, state, and federal levels for improvements that will reduce inequality and increase economic opportunity. So we anticipate a lot of interest from our members, and we're ready to assist in that, and are really pleased to be invited to participate as it gets off the ground and to be asked to be a partner with Stanford, third sector, and the state, along with the states, of course, of Washington and Oregon, and their local partners to be able to get this started and really produce some great results for our customers that we serve.
Thank you all. And so I hope that provides you all with just a sense of what a collaborative effort this endeavor is. We understand that data exists both at the local, state, and federal level, and this initiative is really seeking to combine the relevant data sets from each of those areas and provide meaningful services to local communities to make sure you can use that data to learn and improve your service delivery for your populations. So with that, we will dive in to our agenda and talk a little bit more about what this grant opportunity looks like and to hopefully help you decide if it's a fit for your community. So to get us started, the headline, what is the Administrative Data Pilot Grant? This is a grant that has been provided from the Federal Social Innovation Fund, which is a component of the Corporation for National and Community Service. And third sector and Stanford were awarded this grant to then turn around and host a competition, which is what we're introducing to you today, that will select state and local governments to provide services around data access and data linkages, as well as capacity building, training, and deployment of that data to measurably improve lives. So we are getting funding from the federal level that's able to enabling us to support at least 3 communities throughout the next 3 years to do this work. Again, very focused. The point of this particular grant opportunity is to start with the data, both at the federal, state, and local level, and see how the existing data sets, the existing data we're collecting, can actually be turned into information to help improve lives and to better improve service delivery. So the services that will be provided under this grant, which we'll tell more about in the coming minutes, will both improve and inform outcomes-oriented projects and programs that are either already being implemented in your communities and you want to get access to information and data to understand how it's going, or for new programs that you may be curious to implement and you want to do so in an outcomes-oriented way. This opportunity will provide up to $236,000 in services from Stanford, third sector, and partners to selected grantees. And the length will be about 2.5 years for grant service activities. So we have a 3-year grant from the Social Innovation Fund. Will take us about 6 months to run the competition and select folks by the end of March. And so that gives us about 2.5 years to work with you all and provide services to those who are selected. And highlight, again, this jurisdiction, because of the data sets we have available to us at this time, this competition is available to state or local governments in California, Oregon, and Washington. So that is the headline. Again, for quick background, we are so grateful to the Federal Social Innovation Fund, who have provided the resources to Stanford and third sector to get this grant off the ground. And we will continue to be reporting out to them throughout the 3-year grant period. And I think also for those grantees, they'll be able to take advantage of the federal learning communities that will be created throughout this work. What are our goals for this administrative data pilot? We have 4 big things that we are seeking to accomplish with grantees for this program. So if you are selected under this Administrative Data Pilot Award, you will first and foremost be enabled to have access to and linkage between your local data sets on the ground, the state data sets, and federal data sets that are relevant for your program of interest. So this grant will ask you to apply with a particular program of interest. It will ask you to say, hey, we've got these local data sets for housing vouchers, but we want to know, do these housing subsidies actually help people get meaningful work, grow on career pathways? Does it improve their access to benefits and their movement through benefits? And we have no idea about that because those data sets sit at the state and federal level. So our goal is to help you create a bigger picture and a more complete picture to glean information from that data. Again, those actionable insights to turn all the information that's out there at the state, federal, and local level into information that you can use to improve your programs. A key part of this award also is not just to analyze the data and link the data, but to help you use that data to improve program delivery. I really liked what Will said about, hey, this is about, we're delivering services at the county and state level every year. How can you actually deploy the information that you learn from the data to improve your programs and to improve the folks that you're serving? And then how can you also be part of a community that is going through the same process and develop and share best practices throughout the way? I think the other thing that's important to highlight for this grant is that while it's a 3-year grant from the Federal Social Innovation Fund, and we are requesting that applicants apply with a particular project that they want to start with, we do not intend for this to be a one-off. You can analyze and access this data once and never again. The whole underwriting for this project and this work is to build the capacity within your staff at the state and local government level, as well as to build the relationships that are going to allow you to access this data that will be linked together for years to come after this grant. So whether it's that one project you come with initially or for future outcomes-oriented projects. So that's something that's very important to the partners involved in this project. So those are our goals. I think we also, so what's in it for you? Why should you apply for this award if you're a state or local government are listening to this webinar? I think first, it's really up to you. The question that you need to ask is, will access to data from state sources or federal sources help us gain new insights on the impacts of the programs that we have currently? Do we have a particular pain point, particular need that we don't feel we are meeting to the best of our ability with our programs, and we need more information to understand? So if there's a problem that you would like more information on about your programs and your service delivery and your community, this could be an interesting opportunity for you. If you're interested in, again, accessing data from we're looking at multiple data sources from the census state level as well as the state level, and I'll ask Stanford and Mike Wilkening to go into some detail on that in a bit, to create a more complete picture of the impact of your programs. We also, I think one of the pain points we've found in our work is that data access agreements can be cumbersome and long. And so one of the goals of this project is to help facilitate and streamline those agreements through Stanford, through Census, and the work that we will be doing throughout this, and to create those templates, so to minimize the heartache and headaches on the local legal staff. We also, again, very committed to building staff capacity at state and local government through experiential learning. And what we mean by that is, we can have multiple seminars at Stanford on how to integrate data and how to access it. There's really no substitute for actually going through a process alongside Stanford and third sector, not just to link data and understand information from what it says, but then to deploy that data and actually see how it plays out for program management for a particular project. And so we are committed through this project to creating deliverables that both build a roadmap or a blueprint for future outcomes projects in your communities, but also make sure that you have an ongoing feedback loop between data and program delivery, so you can both collect results as you go and learn from program implementation as you go. And I think that's something that we're excited to do both with local governments as well as figure out ways to include local service providers in that as well. So at this point, I would very much, I'm sure you're all eager to understand, well, what types of available data do we have for this award? And so I'd love to turn it over first to Stanford and then also to Mike Wilkening to talk a little bit about the federal and state data sets.
So yes, this is Charles Varner. To talk about the federal data, I thought it would be helpful to bring in Jonathan Fisher here. He's a former Census Bureau Research Data Center Administrator, and so he can provide you with a little bit of background on what sort of data sets are available via that framework.
Thank you, Charles and Caroline. Census Bureau has a mandate now to show how the Census Bureau data that it collects can be used for program evaluation, and they also have the legal authority to receive data from federal, state, and local agencies. And so the Census Bureau has the data it collects, like the Decennial Census and the American Community Survey, among others, but it has also partnered with Medicare and Medicaid and the Federal Health and Human Services, HUD, and all these other data sets, and have purchased private data from credit bureaus and from on foreclosures. So they have all this data that they are able to use, and tax data, federal tax data. So they have all these data holdings, and they have the permission to link the Census Bureau data with these federal data and also with state and local data. The Census Bureau just recently finished a project that is going to be similar to what we are doing here, where they worked with New York State and New York City and received SNAP and TANF data from New York State and partnered with a university and the New York City government. They worked with the New York City Center for Economic Opportunity, which is part of the mayor's office. And so they had this joint collaboration where they accessed the program participation data, linked it to Census Bureau data and other data, and everyone accessed it through an RDC, a research data center in New York. So they have all these data and have the authority to link it and do program evaluation.
Thanks, Jonathan. And then Mike, I think, was going to talk about the state data.
Yeah, so again, this is Mike Wilkenane. So for this project, we've been working with the Department of Social Services, the Department of Public Health, the Department of Healthcare Services, and OSHPD to go through their data sets and see what would be available for the project. And so we're working with Caroline to get that information to you all on the types of reports or data sets that you could ask to have access to. They'd, of course, be subject to data use agreements, and some of them are going to be de-identified. They'll all be de-identified for the most part, but they'll be some will be aggregated, some will be more individual level, and it's actually quite a large number of reports and data sets. I think in public health, I've got over in excess of 60 lines of the different things that are available, like similarly with healthcare services and OSHPD and social. So it's a lot of information, and we're really kind of looking forward to seeing what the applicants come up with as far as projects that they could use the census level data and then the different data sets that we have, and also the local ones, and what sorts of outcomes we can be looking for, and really how we can improve the programs and people's lives as a result.
Great. Thank you, Mike and Jonathan. And again, so this is just one, at the federal level, we will have access to census data for all 3 states. And then in each state, it'll look a little different, the picture of state data that'll be available to be accessed. And then, of course, there's local data, right? We understand that there are databases that are extremely valuable at the county, state, and city level. And we request that folks who are applying articulate the data sets that they would like to bring forward to be linked and integrated as well. So we are excited about the fact to kind of bring in the full vertical integration of data from federal, state, down to local through this project, and are particularly excited to use specific programs and projects as the first entry point to start to develop those relationships. So I also want to remind folks, we're 9 slides in and we haven't received any questions yet, which either means we're doing a good job or you don't realize that you can put in some questions and answers and type those in, and we will keep track of those. We'll try our best to answer those today, and if we cannot, we'll certainly incorporate the Q&A into a public-facing Q&A document that we send out also via email. So please feel free to type in questions as you have them, and we'll make sure you have time to answer them. Great. So moving on to the specific services that are provided under this grant. So we have 3 main buckets of activities that will be provided by Third Sector and Stanford. And you can guess what they are, and they're also on screen. But the first is really going to be around data access support. So at the very onset, once we've selected folks and they've articulated and we've identified with you, what are the data sets that are most relevant for the outcomes that you are wanting to track and learn from? Stanford will focus on determining the requirements for data access and working with the partners at the state level and the local level to make sure we can streamline that and ensure that for you. Structure those data use agreements. Stanford will take the lead on that. And then also assistance with thinking ahead post 3 years, what's the ongoing data access going to look like? On the technical assistance side, you'll again see both Stanford and Third Sector providing help here. And so that will be working. This is when it's really gonna, the roll up your sleeves portion comes in with your staff, where Stanford will be supporting your staff on the data analysis to evaluate the impact of programs and looking at the operational program management piece. Also, Third Sector will come in and actually look at how the contracts you're working on can incorporate the use of data and build in that feedback loop to be tracking results on a more ongoing basis for learning. And we will be very focused, again, we're not focused on the research side of things for this grant, as you can see with these services provided, but very much focused on capacity building and giving you the TA to learn how to do this work, hopefully not just for one project, but for many. And then the third piece, which third sector will lead, but will very much be with Stanford as well, will be creating a learning community across all of the selected grantees. And so that's going to include a combination of peer learning experiences virtually and on-site at Stanford, but also specific technical trainings, right? If everybody's grappling with data sharing agreements and wants to see templates and best practices and learnings, we will create those trainings that can be for specific community level staff as well as your legal staff, to say the least. And so we'll be providing those throughout the 2.5-year period for services provided under the grant. So moving on to the eligibility criteria, we've hit a couple of the headlines here, but did want to reiterate who the eligible applicants are under this grant. So we are restricting the primary applicant to be local and state government agencies within 3 states, California, Oregon, and Washington state. And so partnerships are absolutely possible with providers and other stakeholders. So if you have existing evaluators or service providers that are really curious to learn about the impact and outcomes for their programs, absolutely welcome to include partnerships as part of the application, but the government agency must be the lead. Additionally, and we've referenced this a couple times, for this program, you can't just apply and say, we want access to all the data because we want access to all the data. You have to identify as part of this grant program an initial program to start with that's focused on the broad area, and it's very broadly defined, of economic opportunity. So very broadly defined and inclusive. We're happy to talk more if people have questions on an individual basis, but we have a hard time, given that the focus of communities is to deliver services to improve lives and opportunity for their constituents. Most programs, we believe, fall under that broad umbrella. But the goal is really to start with an existing or a new program to test out this data linkaging work and to see if we can track and improve outcomes in an ongoing way. So examples include child welfare programs or child welfare transition programs, housing mobility programs are a particular interest, as well as recidivism and other programs that you think could benefit from access to census data or state level data sets that were mentioned previously. So those are eligible applicants. And we will be sure to, again, both this webinar is being recorded, but we will also be in advance of when the application is released, clearly articulating all of this for you all too. So in terms of what the application is going to look like, so even though it'll be launched on January 9th, we're able to talk with you about the broad buckets of readiness that we will be considering as we go through our selection process. So the biggest bucket that we have found is critical for this work is to truly have the government leadership and staff commitment to using data for decision making. So that'll be the one that we are looking most closely at, and I'll get into a little bit of what that looks like in the coming slides. We also want to focus on, again, those communities that have a clear sense of the populations, the problems, and the outcomes that they're seeking to get additional data and information on. And so that first pilot project, that first program where you're thinking of starting, we're hoping that you have a clear idea of where you want to start. And then we'll also be considering the understanding of the data sets required to measure outcomes of interest. Third sector and Stanford, we are happy as part of this grant application process to get on the phone with you prior to the application deadline in order to help you have this be a conversation as to whether or not we have the federal state data sets that may be of interest and may be relevant to your program of interest or outcomes of interest, to make sure that it's going to be a good match and you will be putting in time well spent on the application. And then we also are really focused on the commitment to community learning. So both, again, this is not a research program. This is more of an action-oriented program where we want to make sure that the data we provide the information that you get from it is used to improve program delivery, is used to help service providers better perform their services. And so we are very much prioritizing projects that focus on that. So a little bit on each of these. We would love to see evidence of commitment by government leadership to implementing new data strategies. So to the extent that at the local level, you've already made a commitment in investing in data, not just for compliance, but data for learning, we'd love to know about that. And we think that hopefully the state and federal connection could further that commitment that may already be there. But it's also critical for us to see detailed planning for the staff and any other resources that may be there to support the project. Because we're focused on capacity building for staff at the local and state government level, we want to know that there's staff that are interested in that kind of capacity building and that there's a willingness to support that professional development for them. And we're also interested in the track record of the local government for any sort of systems reform effort and embracing of innovation and learning, using data for learning at your institution. So would be excited to learn about that in the application process. Under targeting of populations and outcomes of interest, again, we're seeking for clear definitions of what are the outcomes that you would like data on, so we can tell you whether or not we're able to give you information on those outcomes. What are the particular target populations? Is it youth aging out of the foster care system? Is it certain folks eligible for TANF or federal, state, or local benefits? Is it certain groups that are requiring housing assistance? Including at the local level, your understanding of the size of those populations and some of their major characteristics. And then as well as thinking about the description of the added value of administrative data for those target outcomes. So this is where you talk a little bit about what's the program where you think you can really move the needle if you had more information, more data, and why that particular program is where you would like to start this relationship. For the other two, understanding of data sets required. So we would love to understand the status quo for your community on the existing data sharing agreements. So for those of you that have gone through the difficult work of getting data sharing agreements, understanding what those are, what that has been, would be excellent. Also, an articulation, this would be where you would put in what are the local data sets that you would be bringing to the table and that you're interested in linking in with the relevant state and federal data sets for the particular project that you want to start with. And then on the commitment to community learning, again, what would be the planning to make sure that this data and this information is used for learning both within the agency or within the government agency, but also potentially accessible for relevant community partners. So if you're doing a housing related project, housing mobility related project, will service providers be able to access some of the learnings and the information from the data integration? And what's the plan for doing that? Or what would be the barriers to doing that we would need to overcome in the project? As well as what would be, once this grant is over in 3 years, how will the local government think about ongoing community learning past conclusion of the grant period? So that would be, is there going to be a particular person on staff who will have the knowledge that they can continue to share and build after this grant period is gone, etc. So those are the 4 major areas of readiness that we will be looking for your feedback on in a concise form, in a short application. We also have a couple of supplemental criteria. The first, so these are additional factors. They will not be specific for points, but will be sort of balancing factors for the application. The first is the potential for impacts during the grant period. So this one's really interesting because you can obviously invest and want data around interventions that may be very longitudinal in nature, where you could get feedback 10 or 15 years from now. And we're absolutely open to considering projects of that nature. I think the priority, we'd love to be able to provide data access for programs that may be able to see progress for project management and programs within a 3 to 5 year period. And so if there are projects that build evidence for information and also give that feedback within a year or 2 years, such as housing mobility, again, providing a particular intervention to a family and then being able to track the impact of that housing voucher on them for their economic opportunity outcomes would be one example of projects that might be able to give a feedback on a little bit of a shorter time frame than the 10 to 15 years. And the second balancing factor is pay for success projects under development. So if there are programs that are currently developing pay for success contracts, which would be one form of an outcomes-oriented contract that require ongoing data access in order to keep learning and improving over time. That is one of the things that the Social Innovation Fund cares deeply about, and it will be a supplemental criteria for us as well. Lastly, and I'm almost done talking, so we're ready to get to some of the questions, but additional notes for applicants. So as we've mentioned previously, at least 3 applicants are going to be selected throughout this process. And I think we really are hoping to create an efficient application process so it can be helpful to organize your thoughts, and then we will look to serve as many opportunities as we possibly can. The applications will be short. And we, again, encourage folks to reach out to us through the email that will come up in a couple of slides to think about what types of data access should be would be required, whether or not the programs and outcomes you're interested in are a good fit for the data sets we have access to do that during the application period. Again, we're anticipating 2.5 years of grant services under the Social Innovation Fund. Again, we're hoping to really lay the foundation to continue these relationships, continue this data access post-grant award. But under the Social Innovation Fund, you would be getting 2.5 years of services from Third Sector and Stanford, and a maximum level of $236,000 in services. And the last thing I wanted to mention is while we'll be able to serve at least 3 and hopefully many more if we receive quality applications through this grant period, we also have other funding opportunities that are very interested in seeing the demand and the interest in this work. And so any semi-finalists may also be re-engaged through other awards, including Third Sector's additional Social Innovation Fund program that's specifically focused on child welfare. So all to say is, if you think this is interesting, please reach out to us. We'll easily have a short follow-up conversation, and we'll be able to help you understand whether or not it's worth putting in that 5-page application to see whether for this opportunity or others we may be available. So last part from me on key dates and milestones. Application phase. So this is our pre-webinar where we really want to kind of get on your radar screen, talk to you a little bit about what the opportunity might look like, and give you a heads up for planning purposes. So on January 9th, the full application will be released with all of the application materials and the full list of available data sets underneath this program. We'll be having another webinar with more specifics around the point allocations within the application, and again with timeline and more specifics around the types of projects that might be relevant for the data sets we have access to. January 25th, we are requesting letters of interest to come through, and that's one way where you can ensure that we reach out to you and ask for a pre-application due date conversation to make sure, again, that this is a good use of your time and it's a good use of everybody's time for your community to be considering this opportunity. And then the applications will be due February 17th. And throughout, we're happy to do these discovery calls again. We want to make sure that we know your time is limited, and we want to make sure that this is a good fit for your community if you are interested. Review phase will be from February 21st all the way through selection at the end of March. So you can expect to have an announcement, selection by the end of March, and an announcement of subrecipients by March 31st. And so now we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. I really appreciate folks who have been typing those questions in, and I will address as many as I can on this phone call, but if we are unable to answer the questions today, I'll make sure that we follow up in a Q&A section discussion questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn to you all, and please feel free to continue typing in questions as they come up. So the first question I've got is, do the grantees need to hire their own evaluators? No. Stanford and Third Sector are going to provide the evaluation support during the grant period. So you do not need to hire your own evaluator. If you already have partnerships with evaluators, we welcome them to be part of that partnership discussion, but it is not a requirement. Is there a possibility that the state level data owners could deny data requests? So Mike Wilkening, this is something that I would love for you to weigh in on. I think from what our conversation so far, it is possible, but we will be spending considerable time working to negotiate access. And I think part of our reason for partnering with the states before and during this application process is to get a clear understanding of what the possibilities are before we ask people to do an application. Mike, would you like to weigh in? You're still there? He may have had to move on. The last thing I'll say on that piece is that we'll also be engaging local research partners at the University of Washington and Oregon State University to help facilitate data access within those states. How big or small of county, did I hear, Mike, are you there?
Caroline,
Go ahead.
Charles.
Oh, Charles, I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on that question.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in the sense that in both California and Oregon, we've been working very closely with, well, in California, it's ourselves. In Oregon, we've been working very closely with a team of researchers at Oregon State University who both have a demonstrated track record of accessing these data and getting the necessary agreements in place. So anything is possible. It's certainly possible that specific data requests may be denied by the states, but I think you should have a high degree of confidence that you're working with a team that has been successful in getting those agreements in place across the federal, state, and local levels in all three of these states.
Thank you, Charles. The next question is, how big or small of county and local jurisdictions are you looking to fund? So we currently do not have a preference for size of county and local jurisdictions. I will say, if folks are concerned that they're from a smaller jurisdiction, we are also open to regional applications. So if there are a couple of counties or cities that have similar problems, similar pilot projects that they want to look at, we would be open to that regional approach if that would be preferable, but we currently do not have a preference between size for county and local jurisdictions. The next question is, how will data sets be linked and who links the data? So Stanford, I'm happy to have you jump in as well, as Stanford will be managing the data linkage process in conjunction with the local jurisdictions. And so I think that is one of the areas where we are candidly open, and part of this administrative data pilot is to understand the best way, the most efficient way to link the data that's also going to be effective for ongoing access beyond the grant period. So that's part of what this pilot award is meant to figure out. Stanford, do you want to jump in, Charles?
Yeah, I think that's right. We're open to different possibilities for exactly how the linkages will take place. But I want to add that we have been working, and Jonathan Fisher may want to speak more to this, but we've been working very closely with the Census Bureau, who is very experienced in doing these linkages across federal and state data sets. I think they've also done some local data linkages as well, but that is I think that's a primary avenue that we've been pursuing thus far to link state level data with federal data. Jonathan, is there anything more you want to add to this?
No, I think that's sufficient. But if there are more specific questions, I can jump in. But you did a good job, Charles.
Great. Next question that I'd also love for Charles to answer, or Jonathan. How would you envision data linkage for data sets that are de-identified? Good question.
How do we identify? Can you repeat the question?
How would you envision data linkage for data sets that are de-identified? It's a great question.
Right. So I think the linkages that we're envisioning and the ones we've done so far initially link identified data, but the Census Bureau, if we were to discuss that particular route for linking, although I know there are others out there who are doing this as well, takes these identified data in the very secure research data center framework, and even internally at the census itself, links the data with those identifying variables, and then applies a de-identified protected identification key, which makes the data set de-identified. And that's what can be released to researchers, such as us at Stanford, to conduct analyses on that data. So I hope that, so
I think,
yes,
Charles, if I can jump in, the data, if we are going to partner with Census, they need to be given data with the identifiers. They will link the data to Census Bureau and to these other resources, and then remove the identifiers before providing the data to any researchers, as Charles said.
Right. Or back to a local government, for example.
That depends. Whether it goes back to a local government will depend to, if we're talking about census, then census data itself, as I understand it, cannot go outside of the research data center framework. So to the extent there's census data on the linked data set, that will stay in the research data center. It is possible for census to apply a separate ID variable to, say, a local government's own data, or say local government merged with state data. Census Bureau has the census has the technology to apply a separate identification key, and obviously, I believe, obviously a local government's own data could be released back to it with this de-identified key. But to the extent the Census Bureau data is on it, that would stay in the RDC.
And I think one of the things that this grant opportunity will look to do is think about how can we best facilitate access to that census data in an ongoing way from state and local governments, even if it's at the RDC. Great. So
yes,
we'll
be working on that.
Great. The next question that we're able to answer, and thank you so much for everybody's questions. This is awesome. We're going to get through as many as we can. Is funding available through this initiative to offset associated staffing costs? So the grant, really great question. The grant is for services only from third sector and from Stanford, but we are looking to engage partners to possibly provide funding for local staff efforts. And so to the extent that that is a need for your communities, articulating that in the application process, one, letting us know, but articulating that in the application is a way that we can make sure that that gets to folks who have resources that could be provided for that. The next question is, will MOUs between local and state governments be needed to ensure data collection database communication, and deadline agreements? And if so, will Stanford, CPI, and third sector help facilitate this agreement? So the answer to that question is yes. The main goal for Stanford and third sector through this work is to streamline that process and facilitate that MOU process or data sharing agreement process, in conjunction, of course, with our state partners in California, Oregon, and Washington. I think for the last question, so we have about 5 minutes left, and I'd love for Stanford, Jonathan and Charles, if you could explain, take a moment to step back and explain a little bit the census RDC, and share, just what that is for folks that may not be familiar.
So I'll start. The Federal Statistical Research Data Center are Census Bureau facilities. So they are Census Bureau facilities outside of Washington, D.C. So there is a room, a secure room on Stanford's campus that is official, even though it's on Stanford's campus and Stanford property, is officially a Census Bureau facility. Researchers with approved projects that have gone through a background check, a federal background check, are allowed to access the RDC and conduct research on the data that for this approved project. And so you will have, for a specific project, you can say, okay, I'm going to access this data from the local county that provides it, that will be linked to census data, and all of it will be de-identified, and researchers will be able to enter and access computers that will have these linked data together, and you'll be able to conduct. We'll be able to evaluate the local program, and it is not just Stanford researchers who could access the data. It would be if it's with a local county partner, it could be the local county partners also accessing the RDC. There are I think 5 RDCs in California. There's one in Seattle and none in Oregon right now, but there are, I believe, 3 around Los Angeles, one at USC, one at UCLA, and one at UC Irvine. And then there's also one at Berkeley. And so the data reside in a server at Census headquarters, and the RDC just has terminals that access those servers. And so a researcher in LA or Seattle could access the same data we have access to here at Stanford. And so it's for these approved projects where we can access the data and work jointly on them remotely.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And I think that's one of the, having your expertise on the census side is going to be something that certainly throughout the grant period, we would want to work closely with to make sure that the local communities have the type of access they need in order to get the programmatic information, relevant programmatic information for communities. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I just want to wrap up and say thank you for your engagement and for attending this webinar. The next steps for us in this process, we will post this webinar recording for any of your colleagues that may have not been able to join us today, and we will also circulate it via email. And if you sign up, since you did sign up for this webinar, you'll receive all of the announcements around the competition and any other announcements that we make. We encourage you to submit any follow-up questions that are specific to your jurisdiction or more broad to sifcompetition@thirdsectorcap.org. We'll make sure we pull that together for the frequently asked questions before January 9th and send that all out to you. And I did just want to remind folks key competition dates. The application will be released again on January 9th. We'll have a second webinar on January 18th. And the application deadline will be February 17th. And as soon as now, if you have particular questions about what might be relevant and if this is a fit for your community, you can reach out to us at sifcompetition@thirdsectorcap.org, and we'll be sure to set up a time to have more specific questions answered for you on that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Stanford. Thank you, State of California and CWDA for joining us today. And have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.